Okay, so let's start with talking about the first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, episode 1 of season 1 is entitled Welcome to the Hellmouth. It's a two-part episode, actually. Welcome to the Hellmouth and The Harvest originally aired as one 2-hour introductory episode. But every time after that, when they would air reruns, because networks used to do this thing called reruns, and they would re-air episodes in between seasons of shows. They didn't really used to have like summer shows. There was just, fall through May, and then over the summer was repeats. Some education for those of you who are too young for those years. So we're going to start with Welcome to the Hellmouth, which is the first part of the two-part episode. So here's our introduction. This is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? So where can we start? What can we glean from what's going on in this episode? We can start with some interesting interpretations. Buffy is not an overtly religious show. As I mentioned, Joss Whedon, the creator of the show, is an atheist. So clearly he's not trying to do some kind of heavy-handed moralizing. But there are those moments when the network does that, where they'll say, this is a show for teenagers, make an episode about how it's bad to drink, So that does happen, but usually Joss's response to that is to make an over-the-top, ridiculous episode when they ask him to do something like that, which is fun. But that's not this episode, and I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's start here. While Buffy is not a religious show, it doesn't have this heavy-handed moralizing, it does have its own mythology. So there are kind of rules and themes that are common in some religious circles, like prophecy or calling, right? So Buffy has the gift of prophecy. She has these dreams that have something to say about the future of events. And Buffy is fighting her calling. She doesn't want to be the Slayer. And another thing that's worth noting that's not really about the mythology, but there are a couple things in there. Buffy accepts those who society, i.e. Cordelia, tells her that she should not. So Buffy's interested in making friends of all kinds, and she doesn't seem concerned that Willow's wearing the wrong outfit. And that, Cordelia doesn't like Jesse or Xander. Life is short is apparently one of Buffy's philosophies. Seize the day, because tomorrow you could be dead. Although hopefully not, because if we run out of characters, that'll suck. That's like a pun. Ooh. Sorry. So what are your favorite lines from this episode? That's something to notice and be aware of as the show goes on, is that Buffy is notorious for its writing. It's a critically acclaimed show. Its writers really did a lot to change the way that Hollywood wrote, the way that, those of us who are internet nerds talk online. He shaped the way that speech happened for a subculture of a generation. So pay attention to the writing, because it's witty and it's great, and it's something that Joss Whedon and the show are known for. What does it mean that Buffy is chosen? Right? Like, what does that mean? What do her gifts mean? What does it mean that Buffy is, super strong? I think of a line that many of us are familiar with. With great power comes great responsibility. And that kind of goes on to be a message of Buffy. Buffy has great power, and kind of has a responsibility because of it, whether she wants it or not. But since this is the first episode, it might be helpful to point out some themes that you might want to think about this season. As we can tell, Buffy doesn't seem to be too keen on being the Slayer. She has unique powers and a unique role, but she doesn't want them. Buffy wants to be normal. Something we often think about, though, when it comes to leaders of the world, is how reluctant we want them to be, in a sense, right? We recognize that power-hungry people don't make good leaders. They're not heroic. Power-hungry people are not heroic, they're just power-hungry. But where is the line between resisting responsibility and a hunger for power? Like, where do we want someone with power to be on that continuum? Because there's a spot, right? It's not either extreme. We don't want someone to be really power hungry, and we don't want someone to be so resistant to use power that they won't in times of crisis. Buffy does not want to be the Slayer. She doesn't want the responsibility of being the Slayer. I don't want the responsibility of being president. Is that wrong? In Buffy's case, she doesn't have much of a choice. Is it okay that she doesn't have a choice? I mean, that would kind of suck if someone tomorrow just came up to me and was like, no, you have to be the president. I don't want to be the president, you know? It's a lot of responsibility. I don't want to be faced with decisions of who to bomb and who's going to live and die. And those are decisions that have been placed on Buffy, whether she wants them or not. We can also look at this metaphor of Slayer as a form of identity. Buffy is resisting who she is. Whether she wants prophetic dreams or not, she has them. And whether she wants super strength or not, she has it. Buffy is the Slayer, whether she wants to be or not. What does that mean? Where are Buffy's rights in that? And if we're looking at it like a metaphor, we could think about it as a metaphor for sexuality or gender identity or something like that. What does it mean to resist pieces of who we are or to accept them? And what does that struggle look like? Who is Buffy? Buffy resists the idea of being a Slayer, but once something happens, she can't help but get involved. It's who she is. So what can we learn from Buffy? She understands the importance of helping others to the best of her ability. She understands that Willow's outfit doesn't say much about the kind of person she is. And she befriends the likes of both Cordelia and Willow. And we'll talk about the conclusion of this 2-part episode soon. I would normally post these videos a week apart, but because it's a 2-parter and perhaps you watched it as one big thing, I want to make sure that you can discuss them as one big thing if that's your jam. So we'll talk about them, some more questions in the next episode, but maybe we can hold on to some questions and think about things as they proceed in this series. But what does it mean to live for the moment? I mean, this episode seems to kind of have some consequences of Buffy suggesting that. Willow tries to live for the moment and ends up in danger. Is there a balance between responsibility, safety, and fun? And where is that balance? How important are our responsibilities? And to whom are we accountable? Is it important that we do the right thing even when we don't want to? Even when it might be dangerous? Even when it might be hard? How do we choose our friends? How important are popularity or our clothing? And how do you think characters in this show so far would answer those questions? How would Cordelia, how important is clothing or character to Cordelia? How important are clothing or character to Xander? And I think sometimes when you really delve into those questions about those characters, you might be a little bit surprised by the responses. Especially as we get to know these characters and as they grow and change. This show is about its characters. It's about the questions they encounter, and it's about the challenges they come up against. And those challenges and those encounters make them who they are, and they build who they become in this series. These people are not going to be the same at the end as they were in the beginning. And that's one of the great things, because over a period of 7 years, hopefully you and I are not the same people that we were. Because if we are, then we're not growing. So, yeah. Pause, I guess. And we will talk about The Harvest, the next episode, shortly, which you should watch. And at the end of each video, I'll kind of tell you whether I think you should watch the next episode, because some of them are better than others. Okay.